Welcome to the first episode of the KB MMA Show. I'm KB, a longtime mixed martial arts fan, and I'm starting this show so I can give my thoughts and opinions on upcoming fight cards, break down fights that have already happened, talk about MMA news if it interests me. Anything about MMA in general, I will be talking about on this show. This show is sponsored by... I don't have any sponsors. Let's get to the fights. UFC Fight Night 81, also known as Fight Night Dillashaw vs. Cruz, took place this weekend. It was a great card from top to bottom. And I'm going to start from the main event and I'm going to work my way down. I might not talk about every fight, might not give as much detail about all the fights. I'm just talking about what I remember, what I thought about them. In the main event, the greatest comeback in sports history. I called it. Dominick Cruz defeated TJ Dillashaw by split decision, 48-47, 46-49, and 49-46 to recapture his bantamweight championship. Now, personally, I scored the fight for Cruz. I gave him 3 rounds to 2. I gave him the first 3 rounds, and 4th and 5th, of course, there was Dillashaw. That's when he started pouring it on. I'm not going to do a technical analysis of everything that happened in the fight. There's a lot of people that can do that much better than me. I'll just give you my reasoning of why I gave Cruz the first 3 rounds and why I gave Dillashaw the final 2. So Cruz used effective footwork, unorthodox head movement. He made Dillashaw miss a lot of shots, and he landed a lot of his own. He also had a few well-timed takedowns to steal the rounds. It seemed to me like Cruz was frustrating Dillashaw in the early rounds of the fight. That's why I gave him the first 3 rounds. That's my justification. Rounds 4 and 5 were Dillashaw's rounds. He was landing a lot more shots. He finally started working the leg kicks. He was able to back Cruz up a couple times up against the cage. He landed a few shots, but Cruz was able to circle out. But it seemed like Dillashaw was the one doing the most damage during the final 2 rounds. I don't agree with the 2 judges that scored at 49-46. One for Cruz, one for Dillashaw. I believe the one judge who scored at 48-47 for Cruz scored it correctly. I don't know why there was such a discrepancy in the judging. So Cruz finally gets the win after such a long layoff. So many injuries, so much time away from the sport, so many setbacks. He was able to regain the title he didn't lose. By winning this fight, Cruz has a lot of options. He can have the rematch with TJ Dillashaw. He can have the 3rd fight with Uriah Faber. Or he can have a rematch with current UFC flyweight champion Demetrious Johnson. I think the most likely fight right now will be the Uriah Faber fight. Demetrious Johnson is another likely fight, I think. I really don't want to see the rematch between Dillashaw and Cruz just yet. The fight just happened. There's such a long build-up. They're supposed to fight in April. That fight got cancelled because of Cruz's injury. And I don't know, the build-up is going to be too long. I've seen too many promos. I don't want to see that fight right now. Give TJ a couple of opponents. Let him work his way back to the title. He can do it. He's a very talented guy. Just let him build himself up a little bit. Build up some interest. And I'd love to see him do it again, but just not right now. Immediate rematches, I'm not a big fan of them. Moving on to the co-main event. Eddie Alvarez defeated Anthony Pettis by split decision, 29-28, 28-29, and 29-28. This fight wasn't really what I expected. Going into this fight, I thought it would be a crazy stand-up war. Eddie Alvarez surprised me by employing the game plan that others have used against Anthony Pettis. Holding him up against the cage, taking him down, grinding out a decision. I thought on the feet, in the first couple of rounds, Anthony Pettis was getting the better of Eddie Alvarez. He was landing a couple of good leg kicks, body kicks. Eddie was coming back with a lot of good punches of his own, but I thought Pettis had the clear advantage on the feet for the first few rounds. But when Eddie started using that grinding style, started pinning Anthony up against the cage, getting him tired, trying to take him down, it seemed like Anthony started losing a lot of energy. He expended a lot of energy trying to stay up. And that was very surprising. Anthony has been in nothing but 5-round fights for the past couple of years, right? He's been the champ for a while. He's used to training for 5-round fights, and I was surprised at how tired he got and how tired the wrestling made him. I thought this was a hole in his game that he would have improved by now. Clay Guida was the first to expose this hole. RDA capitalized on it and took Pettis' belt. And Pettis was recently working with Izzy Martinez to get his wrestling better. Seems like the blueprint to beat Anthony Pettis is to back him up, put his back up against the cage, and try to drag him to the ground, work some ground and pound, get him tired. So what's next for Anthony Pettis? I honestly don't know. Some people are saying put him up against Tony Ferguson. Some have also suggested putting him up against Nate Diaz. Out of those two fights, I would rather put him up against Nate Diaz than Tony Ferguson, because Ferguson's on a 6 or 7 fight winning streak, and if he fights Pettis has lost 2 straight. I know he was a champion and everything, but I don't think Pettis should be near a contender who's on his way up for the title. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think Tony Ferguson has too many wins. Keep him away from Anthony Pettis. Nate Diaz would be a perfect fight, in my opinion, to test Anthony Pettis. Pettis went out on Twitter or Instagram and he said something like, "Oh, put me in a real fight ASAP." What do you mean by that? Eddie Alvarez imposed this game plan on you. Just because you couldn't do what you wanted doesn't mean it wasn't a real fight. Now, if he wants a quote-unquote real fight, someone who won't hold him up against the cage, someone who won't use an entire mixed martial arts arsenal on him, I think Nate Diaz would be the perfect option. Nate Diaz isn't going to try to take him down. But if the fight does go to the ground, Nate Diaz is dangerous. Nate Diaz is happy to stand and bang with you. If that's what Pettis wants, I think Diaz is the perfect option. Eddie Alvarez might be in line for a title shot, but he might have to win one more fight. He has 2 wins. I understand that. They were against 2 very tough guys, but they weren't super impressive wins. And there's other fighters out there in the lightweight division, and even though they haven't beaten the level of competition as Eddie Alvarez, they've done it in a more exciting way. And knowing how the UFC gives out title shots, Eddie Alvarez might have to win one more impressive fight before he's given a crack at the lightweight title. Alright, moving on to the next fight in the heavyweight division. Travis Browne defeated Matt Mitrione by TKO. 4 minutes and 9 seconds of the 3rd round. Yeah, I don't have much to say about this fight. The eye pokes is what I really want to focus on. To my understanding, Matt Mitrione was getting the better of Travis Browne initially in the stand-up, and then he was eye poked twice. Once in the 2nd round, once in the 3rd. Once in the 1st round and once in the 2nd. And then in the 3rd round, he was caught by a punch. His eye swelled like crazy. Travis picked him up, slammed him down, separated Matt's shoulder, and then just won by ground and pound. Okay, so I just want to talk about eye pokes right now. Eye pokes in general. Intentional, unintentional, I don't care. I don't understand why the referee didn't take away a point. This is ridiculous. It seems like in MMA, it pays to cheat. You can poke a guy in the eye a couple times, you can kick him in the groin, and the refs won't take a point away. I think more fighters should start employing that strategy if the refs aren't going to do anything about it. Intentional or not, in my opinion, those eye pokes really changed the outcome of the fight. Something has to be done in MMA. I remember a couple of years ago, the UFC, or Dana White specifically, was talking about the UFC will be they're researching some new glove technology or a new glove design to prevent or reduce the number of eye pokes. I haven't heard much about that. Maybe they should get back to that. I think the refs have to do a better job. After the first eye poke, there should be a warning. If there's a second eye poke, whether it be intentional or accidental, you have to take away a point. You're a professional fighter. This is something that you have to ingrain in your mind. You can't just be pawing at someone's face with your fingers extended. This is something you have to work on. This is something that has to be changed in MMA. It's so many times. This has happened so many times in John Jones fights. He's poked people in the eyes. No points taken away. Why? Why are the refs so scared to take away points? Are they uneducated? Do they need better training? What are the reasons? I want to know the answers. I really do. That's horrible, man. Eye pokes and shots to the groin. It really pays to break the rules sometimes in MMA. Moving on to the next fight. In the lightweight division, Francisco Trinaldo defeated Ross Pearson by unanimous decision, 30-27, 29-28, and 30-27. I disagree with the 30-27 scorecards. I believe Trinaldo did win the fight, but it was more like a 29-28. In the first couple rounds, what I remember is Trinaldo was landing a lot of knees, kicks, effective punches. He even had Pearson hurt badly at one point. I was surprised with Trinaldo's cardio, but in the 3rd round, he started slowing down. That's when Pearson started picking up. I don't have many other thoughts beside that, but 30-27 I totally disagree with. It was a good win for Trinaldo. Let's see what the future holds for him now. For Ross Pearson, this is a setback, and he's going to have to reevaluate, and we're going to have to see where this leads him. Alright, moving on to the main event of the prelim card on Fox Sports 1. Patrick Cote defeated Ben Saunders by TKO, 1 minute 14 seconds of the second round. Patrick looked awesome in this fight. I remember at one point, Ben went for a takedown, Patrick reversed him and had this tight armbar locked in. It was deep, looked very painful. Ben has awesome jiu-jitsu, he was able to pull out of it, but damn, that was very, very tight. Also, at one point, I remember Saunders was trying to lock up the rubber guard, but Cote was able to escape from that. In the second round, both fighters clinched up, but Patrick was able to land a bunch of devastating uppercuts. Ben went down, Ben was hurt, ref stopped the fight. I think he's won 3 straight fights in a row right now. He called out Nick Diaz in a backstage interview. I think that would be a good fight at 170, but who knows if Nick's going to try to make that weight. Last fight was at 185. He could probably make 170, right? Again, it could be a good fight. For Saunders, I don't know what to say about Killer B. Sick jiu-jitsu. He has very good stand-up skills, but he was just caught in the clinch by a bunch of uppercuts. And that wasn't his best performance. Something he has to improve on by a lot. Alright, moving on to the next fight in the light heavyweight division. Ed Herman defeated Tim the Barbarian Boach by TKO. 1 minute 39 seconds of the second round. So I thought in the first round, I thought Tim Boach was getting the better of the exchanges on the feet. I thought he was landing more punches. Ed Herman in the clinch was able to land a couple of knees, but they weren't really devastating knees in the first round. But in the second round, I think Tim Boach's coach might have cost him the fight. He gave him half good advice and half bad advice. His coach told him, right when you clinch up, just start unloading the uppercuts. Don't worry about the knees. They're not doing anything. And that really turned out to be a bad idea, because when Tim Boach and Ed Herman clinched up in the second round, Ed Herman was able to land a devastating knee on Boach's chin. Dropped him like a sack of potatoes. Right after it landed, you could tell Tim had no idea where he was. He was totally out of it. Ed Herman followed up with a couple more punches. The ref jumped in. That was a very good stoppage and an excellent win for Ed Herman. This was his first fight back in the light heavyweight division, and we're going to have to wait and see if he can make an impact. Herman has alternated wins and losses in his last 6 fights, so he's going to have to really step it up if he wants to be a contender in the light heavyweight division. The light heavyweight division is one of the most stacked divisions in the UFC. For Tim Boach, he might have to reevaluate his career or his coaching or his approach or something. He's lost 3 straight fights. I'm unsure of the first person he lost to, but 2 fights ago he was knocked out by Dan Henderson in 28 seconds or something like that, and he was TKO'd in this fight. It was a bad loss for Tim Boach. Alright, moving on to the next fight in the lightweight division. Chris Wade defeated Mehdi Baghdad by submission, rear naked choke, 4 minutes 30 seconds of the first round. Chris Wade looked excellent in this fight. It was all Chris Wade. Early on, took Mehdi down to the ground, was in his guard, eventually got him up close to the cage, took his back, flattened him out, rear naked choke. He made it look really easy. Now this is 4 straight wins for Chris Wade in the UFC. They weren't against the best competition, but he's a young guy. He's going to get better, and hopefully we'll see this win streak continue. Mehdi Baghdad, he was a guy from the Ultimate Fighter. I didn't really watch the season of the Ultimate Fighter that he was on. I guess it was the Conor and Uriah Faber season. And who knows what the future holds for him. The UFC still needs guys to fill up the Fight Pass cards and the prelim cards, so he might still have a job with the UFC, but maybe not. I noticed recently a lot of fighters are getting very long win streaks. Neil Magny was on like a 6 or 7 fight win streak. Dennis Bermudez was on a 6 or 7 fight win streak. Donald Cerrone was on like 7 or 8 fight win streak. What's going on here? Will Chris Wade be one of these guys to go on a crazy win streak? Let's see who he faces next. And the next fight I'm going to be talking about is the fight that kicked off the Fox Sports 1 prelim card in the featherweight division. Promotional newcomer, yeah, that's fancy. Luke Sanders defeated Maximo Blanco, the wily veteran, by rear naked choke, in 3 minutes 38 seconds of the first round. So coming into the fight, Luke Sanders, he was 11-0 and he was a bantamweight. So he took this fight on short notice, moved up to 145. Like, it was this is an awesome fight, very back and forth. Early on, Luke Sanders I'm not sure if he got taken down or knocked down. I think he was taken down. Max Blanco was able to lock in an arm triangle. It was deep. It was tight. I thought Sanders was going to tap, but he was able to pull out of it, and they went back to their feet. That's when, after Blanco missed a crazy right, Sanders caught him with a big left, dropped Blanco, and then right after that, went in for the choke. He secured the left hand under the chin, had his hooks in, locked in the choke, and got Blanco to tap out. Now Sanders is 12-0. Very good UFC debut for the young man. And also, on top of that, he got a $50,000 performance of the night bonus. Also, Ed Herman got a $50,000 bonus, and Dominick Cruz and TJ Dillashaw got bonuses as well. Now we're going to move on to the fights that happened on Fight Pass. The main event of the Fight Pass prelim card. Paul Felder defeated Darren Cruikshank by rear naked choke, 3 minutes 56 seconds of the third round. This was a very exciting back and forth fight. Cruikshank and Felder traded a variety of strikes on the feet. I remember at one point Darren landed a freaking Shawn Michaels super kick on Felder's jaw, and Joe Rogan was right in the commentary. He said whenever you hit Paul Felder, he just gets mad and comes at you even stronger. I think in the first round it was they were standing up against the cage. Felder hopped up, locked in a guillotine, but Cruikshank was able to pull out of it. In the second round, I think Felder almost had a triangle from the top. He almost had that locked in. These guys just went to war, trading strikes like crazy. And finally in the third, Felder was able to secure a rear naked choke for the win. Felder really needed the win. I'm pretty sure he lost 2 straight fights before coming into this one. So this fight really, 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 really is something he needed. He really needed to come out with a win. Otherwise, 3 straight losses. The UFC used to cut people after 3 straight losses. I know they haven't been doing that recently, but it doesn't look good on your record. And for Darren Cruikshank, this is his 3rd straight fight he's lost by rear naked choke. So something has to change in his camp. He needs to work on his jiu-jitsu. Something has to change. You can't lose 3 straight fights by the same submission maneuver. You can't lose 3 straight fights by rear naked choke. That's just crazy. And the last fight on the Fight Pass card that I'm going to be talking about is in the light heavyweight division. Ilir Latifi defeated Sean O'Connell by TKO 30 seconds into the first round. Latifi cracked O'Connell with the right hand. Right after the punch landed, immediately after the punch landed, O'Connell was on ice skates, did not have control of his legs, was wobbling around, and was on his way down. Latifi caught O'Connell with another punch while O'Connell was going down. And right after that, the ref jumped in, saved O'Connell from any extra damage. I read some people were calling it a bit of an early stoppage. I totally disagree with that. The first punch was enough to where O'Connell didn't know where he was. You could just see he didn't have any control of his arms. He already started having like that fencing response where the people start reaching and you don't have control of your legs. If you're on rubber legs and you don't have control of your arms, there's no way you're going to be able to defend yourself and come back from that. Very good stoppage in my opinion. This fight was excellent for Latifi. He's looked very good in his UFC wins. I believe his overall UFC record is like 4-2 or something like that. And one of his losses was to Gegard Mousasi on short notice, so you got to give him a pass on that. So let's just say he's 4-1. Those 4 wins have been in under 7 minutes combined. So that's what, like a minute 30 each, a minute 45. A minute 45 per fight. Latifi has serious power and you need to keep him on your radar in 2016. For sure, step up his level of competition. If he was able to defeat Sean O'Connell in 30 seconds, I think he needs a much tougher fight next time to really test him out, see where he belongs. I think the UFC should do like a all light heavyweight card or all welterweight card. like they did a few years ago with the heavyweights. I'm pretty sure it was all heavyweight main card. That was something epic. It was a big event, and it helped reset the division. It really helped put into perspective of where each person should be ranked, because just all light heavyweight card in one night, the entire landscape of the division can change. I understand it might not be feasible for certain divisions, but I think at least once a year the UFC should hold an event where the entire main card, or the majority of the main card, is fighters of one division, just to shake things up, to make things more exciting. And what else happened in the UFC? Hector Lombard is going to be fighting Neil Magny soon. When is that happening? I pulled that up somewhere. So Hector Lombard's fighting Neil Magny in the co-main event of UFC Fight Night 84 in Brisbane. I'm not sure if I said that properly. It's happening on March 20th, 2016. Honestly, I thought because Hector Lombard and Rory McDonald had a little Twitter back and forth thing going on, I didn't think he would be fighting Rory McDonald, but I thought he would be fighting someone more near the top of the division. Now, Neil Magny has been on an absolute tear. He's 9-1, I believe, in his past couple of fights. But going against Hector Lombard, I don't know. I can see this fight going two ways, obviously. It's, in my opinion, Neil Magny has a tendency to get rocked, which I believe was illustrated in his last fight against Kelvin Gastelum. Like, he started off strong, but then he got rocked, and then he ended up losing the later rounds. I believe Hector Lombard has a lot more power than Neil Magny, so the fight can go either one of two ways. Either Hector Lombard knocks out Neil Magny, because I believe he has more power than Kelvin Gastelum, and he's more explosive, and he's shown it in his past couple of fights that he has power. But who knows? Maybe without the PEDs, Lombard won't be as explosive, and he won't have as much power. The second way I see the fight going is if Neil Magny wins the fight, I think it'll be by decision. Magny has good cardio. If he can avoid Lombard striking, he could win the fight. And Magny, I think, will have a significant height and reach advantage. He's a very long fighter, very long and lean. The opposite of Hector Lombard. Hector Lombard is a short and stocky fighter, heavily muscled. So who knows what will happen in the fight, but I'm leaning, if I had to pick right now, just based off of past accomplishments. Fuck, this is a very hard fight to pick. I'll pick Hector Lombard. I'll pick Hector Lombard to win the fight. But if he wins, I'm calling it by either KO or TKO. I don't see him lasting 5 rounds and beating Magny. Unless, of course, he rocks him early on and then it goes 5 rounds. But that seems very unlikely. And what else? Also, BJ Penn is coming out of retirement. BJ Penn is now training out of Jackson Wink Gym in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he'll be fighting, I think, in the 145-pound division. I don't know how to feel about this because BJ Penn left the sport with a bad taste in his mouth. That's what I can say. He left the sport on a low. Lost to Frankie Edgar the third time. Had this nonsensical style. His stance in the last fight was something I've never seen before. He was standing on his toes, standing straight up. I've never seen a fighter do that ever. And then I think I read somewhere when this fight was happening, like after the fight happened, he said he was doing that to like avoid his takedowns or something like that. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I thought you're supposed to be like down low, anticipating the level change if you're trying to avoid the takedown, not straight up on your toes. If you want to avoid the takedown, like that just doesn't make any sense to me. Not just me, that didn't make any sense to anyone. Everyone criticized him on his style in the third Edgar fight. But I'm trying to be optimistic. And who knows, with Greg Jackson and Mike Winklejohn in his corner and his training happening out of Jackson Wink, maybe this will be a motivated BJ Penn. A motivated BJ Penn is a dangerous BJ Penn. And I don't want it to end badly. You always hate to see legends come back into the sport and tarnish their legacy. Now, that's not what I'm saying BJ will do. I'm not saying he's going to tarnish his legacy by coming back, but his legacy is already set. He's a legend in the sport. And I think unless he does something big, it's pointless to come back. Unless he wins the title, it's pointless to come back. Everyone knows you're a legend. Just stay a legend, bro. Stay retired. It's better for everyone. Inspire Hawaiian kids to get into mixed martial arts. Try to bring the UFC into Hawaii. I think that should be his goal, instead of focusing on fighting again. I honestly don't know how he'll compete with the people at 145. He looked bad in his last fight. Horrible in his last fight. Why not go back to 155? I understand, 155 is even more competitive than 145, but at least he's had experience at that weight class. He was the king of that weight class. 145, he looked drained, he looked horrible. Unless he has some crazy dietitian that I haven't heard of yet, that can make the weight cut easier for him. But 145 is full of killers. Penn might have to reevaluate his strategy and his goals of what he wants out of mixed martial arts. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you for listening to the first episode of the KB MMA Show. With this being my first episode, I'm sure it was a bit painful to get through. I promise it will be getting better in the future. I will be trying to up my production value, and I'll try to be more coherent, clear, and concise in future episodes. It's the first episode. I'm a bit nervous, and yeah, I just want to bring a different take or a different opinion or different thoughts to the world of MMA, and hopefully I did that. Maybe not so much in this episode, but in the future things will be getting a lot better, a lot more, in my opinion, a lot more in-depth look into certain things. And I'm unsure of the release schedule of when I'm going to be doing this. I'm thinking of doing it as a weekly show, maybe, but it all depends on when the fights are happening and all that. So nothing has been figured out yet. So wherever you're listening to this, whether it be, I think I'm going to release it on SoundCloud, YouTube, maybe even iTunes or Podbean or whatever. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe if you would like to hear more. And once I get a better picture of the upload schedule of this show, I'm going to try to make this a weekly show. And I'm unsure of the day that it will be released right now, but just please be on the lookout. Hopefully you enjoyed it and got something out of it. And lastly, I would like to say, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you want me to talk about something, whatever, you can email me at kbsquestions@gmail.com. Once again, it's kbsquestions@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to the first episode of the KB MMA Show. See you later.